All right, so welcome to Scrapbook Live. Today is July 10th. It is my parents' anniversary. I forgot to give a shout out to them for happy anniversary, 53 years, pretty big milestone. But July 10th, so Wednesday, we're going to be putting together a layout from the Creative Memories blog today. The layout is published earlier this year in April, and it uses Life at the Lake collection. And as I said on the blog itself, I am a sucker for rounded corners. I saw this one and I knew I was going to have to do it at some point. So today is that point. And so I am going to be using, though, as I was looking for pictures that I had that I thought would work well with it, I found some of Kitty. And just before we left Washington, we did get her a little harness with a leash and we took her out into our backyard and we wanted to see how she would do. My brother has cats, and his cat, he's able to put her on the leash and she goes out in the backyard and he's always out there with her. But she's, she can wander around. She's on a lead, a thing. He's got just something in the ground. But so Kitty, we wanted to try, would she even let us put the harness on her? How would she do? And she really did like it. The challenge we had was she would try to dart underneath we had a ground level deck. So of course we always had to keep a nice hold of her leash, the lead, so she wouldn't run off. Anyway, I have photos from that. They're super cute. And it worked out great because we got the new pet collection. So I am going to be using the Perfectly Cute Kitty, I think is what it's called. I have to look at that. Perfect Kitty Cat. I think I called it Perfectly Cute, but whatever. It's cute. I'm going to be using that. It works really well in this particular case. I don't mind the pinks in there and the pinks and the teals and the blues and the brown. It works really well for my photos. So I'm going to switch to my overhead camera and we will get started. Okay, so I have my handout all ready to go. I've got some adhesives. And for my layout, the part that's great today is I'm going to be we need roughly 6 different patterns. That's what they have in here. If you look to see, they have 1, 2, 3, 4 across the top, and you'll see that when they cut those in half, they're able to use those smaller sections down here at the bottom. You can see the 4, and then they come in with 2 photos, and then they have 2 more of the patterns. So what's great about the pet collection is you've got quite a few tonal patterns to choose from, as long as you're willing to, if you want to cut apart the matte paper, you could buy 2 packs of the matte paper, cut one apart for mattes and use the other for just tonals. And then the designer paper pack, you have 3 different tonal patterns in there. And the opposite side to those tonal patterns are your patterns, your statement prints. So I'm going to be using a combination in here. I need 6 different patterns. So what I'm going to be able to do is cut strips of paper. Now, here's probably where I need to have the downside to moving is I thought I had almost everything unboxed, but of course I would pick the layout that requires a custom cutting system that I cannot find the patterns to. They want us to use the the rectangles custom cutting system. I'll show you what that looks like. You may already have it, you may not have it. It was a newer one. Probably the last time they'd had the multiple smaller pieces. This is it, the rectangle patterns. And they want us to use the square in here to cut our photos. You'd use the square with the green blade inside track to cut your photos and the smaller squares. I looked all over. I cannot find it. I think I know where it is. It's not a pattern a set I use a lot. So I think I had it in my actual, the binder thing that we have that holds the custom cutting system, but I can't find the binder. It's still in a box that I haven't unpacked, I think. So what I had to do is, you can do this with a corner rounder, just cutting your squares in the corner rounder. What I did is I have this as part of my inventory. And so all I didn't want to open it. I don't need another set of the rectangle patterns opened. So I just grabbed my ruler. I can see the plastic cutting on the inside. I measured. Green is about 2 3/4 inch square. So that's what you're going to need to cut, 2 3/4 inch. If you have a pencil, mark that on your sheet here. They are 2 3/4 inch squares. So you can barely see that. But 2 3/4 inch are the size of the squares. If you have the rectangle patterns and you want to use the square, use the square, inside blade, green track, or the green blade on the inside track will get you these squares. But I'm going to be using the handy dandy corner rounder, which could also be fun then, because you could also, if you don't want to have the rounded corners, you could leave them square. You could use a fancy corner rounder. You could use the reverse side and have the notched corners. You could do all sorts of different things with this shape here if you don't want the rounded corners here. Okay, so because I cannot cut out the squares, the rounded corner squares that I need, I'm gonna go ahead and have to trim my paper here to 2 3/4 inch wide, and then I'm gonna cut 2 squares off of each of these 3 papers. I'll use one side will be the tonal, and the other side I'll use, or the other square I'll use the opposite side. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that first. For my background pieces, I'm sure you're wondering about those. I am going to be using the lighter and the darker browns. These are from the Matte Pack out of the Perfectly Cute or Perfect Kitty Cat. So I'm using those. I wanted just some neutral colors that the pattern pieces or the colors of the designer pack would pop off of. I am going to be using some parakeet shimmer paper with the Grassland Border Punch to have some grass, because I haven't shown you my photos, but I will. See, there she is, walking on her little leash. She did so good. I was really shocked she let me put it on her, but she did great. So, grabbing my trimmer, and we'll go ahead and cut these papers down to 2 3/4 inch wide. If you have your custom cutting system and you want to use the square, you can go ahead and just cut those pieces, but I'm going to go ahead and cut them. And I'm not Julia Childing much of this. I didn't do a lot of pre-cutting for this for today. Before I cut, I am double checking the opposite side. So far, for the most part, these aren't too directional of papers. I'm just always double checking to make sure. 2 3/4. So cutting those 2 3/4 inch squares, I'm going to go ahead and cut 2 of each of my 3 papers. Remember, I'm going to use the opposite side. So as I'm cutting these, you can see down here, I've got 2 different patterns to work with from each paper because I am using the opposite side. This would be a great one to do with scraps. I haven't cut into this paper yet at all, so I don't have any scraps. It would be easy to expand this layout into 2 pages. You could cut a couple more of your squares. So here you can see my 6 papers here. Now, the other thing I need to do is I can go ahead, I'm going to go ahead and corner round them while I have everything here. The photos, I went ahead and I printed them from my phone, and I used the Epson. I have an Epson PM400, as many of you know, which is their little photo printer. It prints 4x6s. It prints up to 5x7s. It can print smaller photos. And they have a really handy Epson Creative Print app on your phone that if you have the printer, you can access that app. And it allows you to make little collages. And so because I knew I needed 2 3/4 inch square photos, I was able to print my photos as 2 3x4s side by side on 1 4x6. And then what I did is I just used my personal trimmer and I trimmed them down to 2 3/4 inch squares. So I'll trim this one here in a second when I get done corner rounding all these. And then what I'll do is I will come in and I will corner round all of those pictures. Now I did print 4 small photos. So instead of using where they have some journaling and then they have kind of from the Life at the Lake, they have that big lake print designer paper. I will probably just use all photos down here and come in with my accent paper. So I may not actually need to use all of these pieces, but I'm going to have them available just in case I want to. So I've got all those done. Got my corner rounder out. I'm going to go ahead and corner around these photos. I'll trim my other photos. This layout should go together pretty quickly once you get everything cut to size and all your corner rounding done. If you're using the square paper, the pattern, it's easy enough to cut the squares out. I actually think it's easier when you have the pattern, because you'll be able to come in and kind of lay your pattern exactly where you want it and get that squared nice and really well over your photo. Whereas when you're cutting from the 3x4s, you know, I cut my 3x4 in half, or excuse me, my 4x6. I'm going to go ahead and cut it in half. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then I know I need to cut off from the sides. I need to come in 1/4 inch. So I'm actually going to go ahead and chop a little bit off this left side here and then come in over here on this right side, because she's gazing off to the right. I want to leave plenty of space over here. If I were to cut, you know, and leave a lot of space behind her, it looks a little bit awkward, but I don't want to come in too harsh here. So I'm going to cut a little bit over here. And I can see up here where I'm aiming for. So I'm cutting about 1/8 inch off the back side. And then I'll come in and cut just a tiny bit. I may not even come all the way in. I am notorious when it comes to using the trimmer. I like to shave little bits off my photo. That may not be how you crop. It's just how I do. I've got a guillotine. It's easy for me to shave little bits. So I'm going to cut a little bit and then I look at it. I've got a little bit more I can do. And I think I'm going to go ahead and pull the rest of it off the back side, giving her plenty of space, what she was gazing in front of her. And then I'm going to go ahead. I need to cut off some of the length. So I'm going to bring this down just above her ear, a lot of space up here above her ear. And then I'll see how I look cutting off the bottom, bringing it over to about 3 inches. And the reason I'm cutting it to 3 inches is because now I can look at it again. And I can say, okay, where do I need to cut? I'm actually going to bring a little bit more space, bring a little more off the top. So I am easing myself in to that square. So now I don't want to cut any more here at the top. So I'm going to cut the rest at the bottom to bring it into that 2 3/4 inch square. So there we go. I'll do the same thing over here. Look how furry she is. She has that beautiful, I don't know what they call it on the Maine Coons, but she just has that beautiful skirting all around her. She's a poof ball. She's doing well here. I will tell you, she is definitely on the warm side, but we're keeping the house pretty cool. She has lots of water. We probably need to consider getting her undershaved. I need to look into that a little bit more, but all in all, she's in pretty good spirits. She's eating well. It did take her a little bit. I think she was a little stressed out when we moved, to kind of get back into the groove of things, but she's doing good. Now she's looking a lot up towards the top, so I don't want to cut too much more off the top. You can see her, she's angling up, so I'm going to bring off more off the bottom. And I think I need to come in a little bit more off the side. And just one final trim off the bottom to give myself that final square. Okay, so there's my squares. I have all of my small squares done and lots of little pieces of photo paper. Give those a quick rounding. Now, of course, if you're using the custom cutting system, that process is way faster just because you're not having to, you're kind of doing one fell swoop, right? You just cut. So the nice part about using the custom cutting system is if you do want to make your mats, your radius edges all match each other. If you're using it to make some mats around your square things, when you may find I was to just cut a 3-inch square to mat this on and cut with the corner rounder, the corner rounder doesn't quite match perfectly because just how it is. So if you're really wanting those exact even mats all the way around your squares like this, using the custom cutting system to crop your photos to begin with is the best route to go. Okay, so I've got those. I do have two 4x6 photos, or excuse me, two photos to use at the top. There's one showing Kitty in all her glory, and then I have another one where my kiddo is walking Kitty in the yard. It's kind of crazy, but we couldn't let her off the leash because, or off being held. Like I said, she tried to dart underneath our deck, and our deck was ground level, and I didn't want to have to crawl under there to get her out. Okay, so now we're ready to actually start doing some assembly here. So they want us to use a base piece of cardstock. So I know the background where I want my photos to be, I'm going to use this lighter brown color. Now, I really don't want to use a whole sheet for it. So if I come in here and if I say I'm going to piece together my background, I have a piece of just the cover sheet from the Purrr-fect Kitty Cat collection. Here's the matte paper. I could build everything on this white piece of paper. And I think I'm going to do that because I just don't want to use this whole sheet of paper if I don't have to. So I need a 1 1/4 inch strip for the top edge. And I'm going to use that off of this dark brown paper. It's going to be dark brown at the top, dark brown at the bottom. And then I'll have some mats in the middle. I'll have my grassland border punch. And that's the other reason I'm using the lighter piece here is it gives, it's just keeps it kind of light and friendly. And this color is actually really close to her overall, the coat, the color of her fur. So I'm going to trim 1 1/4 inch off the top, or a 1 1/4 inch strip from this piece of paper here. Now this is where you always want to double check your patterns because I want to make sure I'm cutting perpendicular to here because I think I'm only going to I won't use the last bit of like this lower section. So my question is for me here, do I want to keep these intact at the bottom or do I want to keep these mats up here intact? And I think I want to keep these pieces down here at the bottom. That's adorable with a little paw sticking up in the air and the pretty kitty. We call her pretty kitty all the time. So I'm going to make sure I start cutting up here at the top. So this is my top edge that I said I want to cut, and I need to cut a 1 1/4 inch strip. So I'm going to come over here just to the right of my cut line, and I'm going to go ahead and cut 1 1/4. Make sure, if you've been scrapbook, cutting anything, you want to make sure you've got the right blade in there. I do. I have my straight blade, and that's 1 1/4 inch. The next piece I need is 4 1/4 inch. And here you can see, I want to make sure I cut this section here. So there's the section I'm cutting, 4 1/4. Come over here to 4 1/4. Now see, I have preserved this bottom section. That's what I wanted to do. My goal was to make sure I preserved this bottom section so I can cut these mats apart to use in another project. So there's my bottom and here's my top. Now I could do a little bit of math. I've got 1 1/4 up here at the top. I've got 4 1/4 here at the bottom. So that's 5 1/2 inches total. 5 1/2 inches minus 12, or 12 minus 5 1/2 should be 6 3/4. I kind of did some of this math ahead of time, so I roughly knew what the numbers are. But I don't want to just butt my pieces next to each other. So if I cut this at 7 inches, if I cut this piece right here, this lighter piece at 7 inches, I'm going to have a little bit of an overlap at the top and the bottom, which is great. My darker piece will kind of overlap that lighter piece in the middle, which would replicate as if I had made it just on this background piece. So you can double check that if you want. You can lay your pieces on your background here and you can just grab your ruler. I'm thinking I'm going to cut it at 7 inches, hold my pieces in place, and yep, 7 inches is more than enough. And again, this is the matte paper. I'm going to look at the back. I do not need to cut the whole piece. I only need 7 inches. So I can cut either across the top to here, or I can cut across the top to the bottom section here. So what I'm going to do here is, again, I'm going to preserve these bottom ones because I think they're cute. Again, with the paw, the feed me hello. She is now back to her normal little self where she is like begging for food. So I'm going to go ahead and cut 7 inches from the top here. Come over here to 7 inches. And I preserved that bottom section. Move some of my scraps out of the way. Now it's time to go ahead and start putting this background piece together. And I do realize the one thing I did not get out was my custom cutting system mats. I'm looking to see if I have them, where I put them. I don't know. So we will, I do have my, that's really odd. I'm gonna have to see where I put them. I have my scrap easel. I got that out because that's really important. So I'm not sure where I put my custom cutting system, my mat, my gray 13 by 13 mat. That's gonna be something I'm gonna have to look for here. So I'm gonna use this here. Since I'm not actually cutting anything, I don't mind. I can use this for some measurements because remember this piece comes down 1.25 inches from the top. So this piece, if I'm going to layer it under, it's going to lay under by 1/4 inch. So I'm going to mount this piece here, this lighter piece, which is my background. If we look at the layout, that was replacing their sunset ombre color here. That's what the piece is. It's going to, if you cut it to 7 inches, you're going to come down 1 inch from the top to put that piece in. Now the downside is the scrap easel is just it's a little tricky to see where those numbers are because they don't, you get so used to the 13 by 13 mat where those lines really extend out, and the scrap easel, they just don't extend out quite as well as you would like, or I would like. Once you get that piece in place, you should just double check. You're gonna see that your top piece and your bottom piece will overlap a little bit, basically mimicking what it would have done if I had built it right on this lighter colored tan paper to begin with. So now, beyond that, I think I can just go ahead and put these pieces in. I think I'm gonna wish I have my 13, I have my rulers. I just don't know where that 13 by 13. Well, let me check here. I do have my rolling case, and normally I would put them in my rolling case. Yep, there they are. It's like, wait a minute. I've got it. It will make putting on the squares much easier if I have that 13 by 13 mat. Yes, thank you, Kelly, for chiming in. Lori, this is definitely recorded. If you missed the beginning, you'll be able to catch the whole thing later on my YouTube channel. I do share it back on Facebook. So don't worry, if you're coming in late and you're curious about this layout, it will be available later on YouTube or on Facebook. So there we go. We've got the background kind of put together. So now it's a matter of coming in and figuring out placement of things. I also know, here's my photos. I'm going to put 2 photos in there rather than just 1. I'm going to come in, and these photos, I'm going to stagger these photos. I'm using 4 photos down here at the bottom, 4 square photos instead of so really what's going to happen here is you can see I have room for 1, 2, 3, 4 half squares. So I'll be able to come in and choose my papers. Maybe I'm just going to use all of the patterns. I actually didn't need, I cut 6, but I only need 4. But I think I'm going to have to use 2 patterns and 2 solids to kind of keep it balanced. So my 2 patterns that I have, You can see here, one has a white base and one has a kind of a creamy base. I think I'm going to use the creamy base. I don't have a lot of bright whites in this layout, so I'm going to go ahead, of the patterns I'm going to discard, I'm going to discard this one because it's a white based background. It's just going to grab your attention a little bit more than this creamy based one. And then I will use, I think I'm going to use the pink, and I'll come in with this piece here, the cream colored, or excuse me, the turquoise. The turquoise. Those are going to be the patterns I'm going to use. So what I can do is I can actually probably come in and just cut them in half. Cut them in half is going to be just fine. Do they give us? Yeah, they want you to cut them in half is what they say, even though I think it's going to be a little bit overlap, where I think you would want to cut them off a little bit, but we'll see. I can't forget either, I need to bring in, before I get too crazy here, I need to cut this. I am going to use the grassland. I use the grassland border punch with the shimmer paper, parakeet shimmer. I'm going to trim this to, and this border element really gets customized for things here. They use just 2 stickers here. They use the wave sticker along with the little, whatever those types of plastic boat swimming thingies are in the water, you know, the string of little floaters. I don't know what there's called. Does this have an official name? So they use there, so you can adjust it however you want to adjust it. I'm going to use the grassland border punch, and I think I'm going to use the little paw border sticker with that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to trim this. I'm going to trim I don't need a ton. I'm going to trim it to my tall blades about 1 1/4. So I'm going to start with. So, okay, Mary did ask about the Epson, and thank you, Kelly, for responding to that. The Creative Print app from Epson is what I use. The Epson, yeah, so that you have to have an Epson printer to be able to kind of like get into that print app. So you really can't play with it around. You can't play around with it ahead of time. You need to just have, it needs to be able to, when you go into it, it wants to acknowledge that there is a Epson printer on the other end of that app. So the first thing you do when you have that app is it's going to want to recognize that you have access to an Epson printer. Okay, so these are 2 3/4 inch wide, my squares. So I need to cut my squares in half. Half of 2 3/4 is going to be, well, what it's going to be is me taking this piece of paper and giving it a quick fold and a pinch. That's how we find the half. And there's my half. I can tell on this particular piece of paper, because I've got a plaid stripe, or I've got the plaid in here, that it's right along that teal edge. So that tells me, if I were to bring this in, and it tells me also that half of 2 3/4 is 1 3/8, which math-wise also adds up. So 1 3/8 is going to be half of your pieces. So if you want to cut your pieces in half, cut them to 1 3/8. I'm just double checking. Yeah, that's right, because this next piece was looking just a little. One 3/8, cutting those in half. So again, you may have more squares. I'm only cutting 4 squares in half because I have 4 photos at the bottom. If you have fewer photos at the bottom, you may need more of your decorative squares to fill those in. You might be using some whole pieces in here, but you see I've got my 3 photos at the bottom. And I've got, even if I put my border right here across the top of my paper, I'm feeling a little bit tight. My 2 3/4 inch squares might be a smidge bigger than what you would cut with the square CCS pattern out of the rectangle pattern set. So what's probably happening is I'm just going to have to bring down my piece here and give myself a little bit more space with that. Sorry about that. That was my trimmer falling off my table. So hopefully, and I don't have carpeted floors anymore. I have kind of like a wood floor. So the thing with that is now my rolling chair slides all over the place. Everything, if it gets dropped on the floor, hits way harder. So that's kind of what happened there. So let's come up here. I'm at some plaid at the top. I'll need some blue at the top. I'll need some blue here. If I stick out above the top here, I'll just be able to cover it up with that border piece. I'm gonna come in here with the pink and then over here with that. So there you're starting to see how it's coming together. This will lay over the top here. Now, before I start putting everything into place, I've got everything just kind of dry fitted in. I'm loving how it's looking so far. I do need to come up with a matting situation up here at the top to get my photos to kind of pop off this background. So my option, I have a couple things I could do here. I'm either going to come in, this is where I grab my swatches. I could come in with matting my photos with the teal color, the blue color. I don't mind the blue. I don't know that I want to pull that pattern in. I'm thinking I'm just going to go with a piece of cardstock. So the two colors that I liked, and these are cardstock colors. I have all of the 22 whatever color core line we have in here, and I have the shimmers in there as well. So we have close to 30, just over 30 different lines Creative Memories does of colors of cardstock or shimmer paper that you can use to incorporate in your layouts. But I have two pieces here that I liked. This one is actually Tropical Wave, which was out of a cardstock buffet from a few years ago. And then I have the new Lagoon Shimmer. It's not new, it's just newly available as part of the core line. It's a beautiful color. So I'm just not sure. I think I'm gonna go with Tropical Wave. I think I'm gonna do that. I think I do like the Tropical Wave. It pulls a little bit more of that aqua color out of her leash. So with that in mind, I need to grab a piece of the Tropical Wave. And of course I did not get it out ahead of time. But here it is, Tropical Wave. And I'm gonna cut this. Here's my cardstock. I'm gonna do Tropical Wave. So I need they use a 4.5 by 6.5 inch mat behind their 4x6 photo. I have two options to do here. I could go ahead and I think I'm gonna go ahead and just do the 1/2 inch around it. The question I had, if I do a 1/2 inch, I'm gonna have a really big piece. I think what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go ahead and cut it to 4.5 inches tall, essentially. And because I think I'm gonna mat these two pictures next to each other and just have that 1/4 inch separation here. So it'll be a 1/4 inch on this outside, in the middle, and on the outside here. If I go each of them having that 1/4 inch, I get to be a little too wide, a little bit too much blue in the middle here, and I'm starting to lose the brown on the sides. So I'm gonna do one mat for the two photos. It is going to be 4.5 inches tall, 4.5 inches tall. And then it's going to be 6.5 plus 4 inches, 10 and a half, 10 and 3/4 inches long. That should be the math that adds up, because I have 10 inches of photo, I have 6 inches and 4 inches. And then I can go ahead and add 1/4 inch, another 1/4 inch in the middle, and a 1/4 inch on this side. Though, I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to trim this photo a little bit narrower. And the reason I'm going to do that is because if I pick up it's pretty wide, and I'm not using a mat. If I was using a 4.5 by 6.5 inch mat out of a variety mat pack, I might need to leave it at 4 by 6 inches, especially if there's a design in that middle of that mat that I need to kind of cover up. But I don't have to worry about that. I've got plenty of space in front of her and enough here behind her tail that I can narrow it up just a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now, you may have heard rumors. We are going to be getting a new photo trimmer coming up this sometime later this summer in time for Purrr-fect festivities this fall. So that will make things great because you will be able to measure off the width here. Right now, if I want to measure on the current personal trimmer, I have to kind of rotate things around or do something fancy with some extensions, maybe paper, cardstock, or whatever. I just rotate. I'm going to bring this to 5.5 inches wide, roughly. There we go, 5.5 inches wide. So I took off 1/2 inch. So I have 5.5, 4 inches here for 9. So I have a total of 9.5 inches, 9 3/4, 10, 10 1/4. All right, so that's what I'm going with. When it fell off the table, my blade fell out. Sorry, a little bit of technical difficulties. So 4.5 wide. That's going to give me a 1/4 inch at the top and the bottom. And then I said I needed to be at 10 1/4 wide. What you can do is, it makes you nervous, you're not sure, is before you cut it, grab your photos, line it up with where you're going to cut it, and then put your photos on. Just double check. Yep, 10 1/4. I could probably come in a little less than 10 1/4. I have a feeling this photo is not quite 4 inches, and I know I'm a little shy on this being a full 5.5. So I'm going to cut it just shy of 10 1/4 inches. So there we go. All right, now it's time to start putting things together. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead, I'm going to put my photos on here at the bottom, because any overlap up here at the top for the spacing, these half rounded piece, if they overlap by too much, I need to be able to put my border on top of them. I'm going to use Repo adhesive just because it's going to give me a little bit more flexibility if I need to move things around, line up my paper, everything on the 13 by 13 mat. And I'm going to put my photos in, and I need to keep an eye on where my 6 inches, because I have 2 photos on either side of that 6 inches. And really, you want to make sure, keep an eye on even where 3 inches is. Your photo is going to sit between 0 and 3 inches. Your next photo is going to sit between 3 and 6 inches. There we go. Got the photos in. Now, once I have the photos in, I can put in the rest of these pieces. Just want to line things up. It's okay if it sticks above that piece. I've got that border that's going to come in. That's okay. I'm okay with that. Same thing here at the bottom. I have almost a little more than 1/8 of an inch popping off the top and the bottom here. And the bottom edge, I'll just cut it off. You need to grab your T-square or a ruler to help make sure you have lines even across there. That can be helpful. I am just eyeballing it. And as I mentioned before, if you need to make a second page, you'll be able to add, just keep playing with the squares in the same pattern that's going to go onto the second page. I'm going to put these pieces up here at the top. I basically here just made sure that they were, if I have this piece over here, it's going to come over, just separated from each other a little bit. There we go. It's pretty good. Now I'm going to go ahead and put these pictures on the tropical wave back paper, the back of the mat. I am going to use regular adhesive there because I'm very confident where they're going to go. I haven't thought about the title or embellishments on this, so it may just be a matter of getting these kind of just put in place. I'm not going to mount this in yet. I want to get the border put in first before I place this, because I have a feeling it's going to sneak up a little bit towards the top there. Now the border, I do need to make sure, and I'm a little nervous now, I might need to bump it up just a smidge because I've got my kitty cat, or my paws. Well, the paws are pretty thin. I may have to recut a piece, or maybe I won't. Let me see. Paws are pretty thin, but I don't want to encroach too much on my photo. I am going to recut a piece. I'm going to repunch a piece of the parakeet shimmer. I cut it at about 1 1/4 from the tallest blade, but I really want it to be probably more like 1 1/2. Let's see here. Because I think I want my paw prints to just all be inside that blade of grass. So with the parakeet completely behind it. So if I do that, I need to be closer to, yeah, that 1 1/2, maybe a little bit more, maybe like 1 5/8 inch. So let me do that. I do have my shimmer, my parakeet shimmer here along with my grassland punch. And I'll just recut or repunch another piece here. So I'm going to punch it and then cut it from the tallest blade at 1 5/8 inch. That'll just give it a little bit more space to include that paw sticker. The other thing, and I don't know if I still have it up here, I thought about doing is I thought about incorporating a little bit of dark green behind. Is a little bit more separation. Or let's see, I have another piece. I wondered if I needed just a little bit more. I may do this. So this is maybe cactus paper. I don't know. It's out of one of those 8x10 or the old 12x10 packs. I want to say it's something like cactus is the color. So it's a little bit darker than the shimmer paper behind it. And I'm gonna punch another set of grass to give myself a little bit more dimension to the grass. Okay, and so to do that, instead of starting, I started my shimmer paper at the black line here. You can barely see it. There's a black line there. That's where I started it to cut my shimmer paper. I'm gonna start, instead, I'm gonna start it off to the side. It really doesn't matter where, just start it off to the side somewhere. That'll give me a little bit of an offset. And I will cut both of these at the 1 5/8. I probably don't need to cut the green at 1 5/8, this darker green. We'll come in here. I'm just gonna go ahead and cut it. I'm gonna cut it, it's gonna be behind my, it's gonna be behind the shimmer paper. And so I'm gonna cut it, I'm only gonna cut it at like just over 1 1/4. The shimmer paper is where I need that bigger swath. So I'm gonna come in here at 1 5/8, giving myself plenty of room to put that paw print sticker on there. The other thing I could do is I could put my paw print sticker down and then trim to make sure it fits, but this should fit fine. So what I've got here is, you can see just a little bit of dimension to the blades. I like that. Kind of hard to see, but there's a little bit more dimension to those blades in there. The other thing you can do sometimes is reverse one of the things. And actually, that's maybe what I do, is I'm just going to reverse. I think that's, yeah. So just playing around with that a little bit. A little bit of repo adhesive on the back of the lighter green. That'll let me put it on this darker green. And then I can flip it back over and put adhesive on the back side here if I want to put a little bit of repo on there to keep those blades tacked down. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna line up that bottom of that parakeet is gonna just ever so slightly overlap that green, the darker brown. If I want, I can nestle my photos in there if I want. I do have some space here up at the top. And then I can come in, let me see here. Oh, I'm gonna trim off a little bit. Hopefully this works out well. I'm gonna trim off a little bit. I think I have a little too much of that parakeet. It's a little too wide. What I'm gonna do is what I said I should do. I'm gonna stick my sticker on my border, and then I can see exactly how much I can cut off at the bottom. Paw prints go in the other direction. So that's what I'm doing, is I am just on here, I'm adding that sticker across the border. That way I can see how much can I cut off. And I'm going to cut off about 1/8 of an inch. So not a lot, but just enough. So there we go. It's mostly done. I think at this point now, it's a matter of going through to see, are there any stickers that I want to use? There aren't really any that really show like the leash situation, but I do have some paw prints and hearts and so forth. And I can look through here and just see if there's any options in here that would be able to be, and I can also go through my stickers. Or excuse me, I can go through the mats on the other ones and just see. I do need to clean up the top and the bottom edges. Let me do that. The other thing I have, and this is probably what I'm going to do, is I have room up here at the top and here at the bottom. On this photo, I could come in with the white lettering, the sans serif lettering, and come in here across the top or the bottom and write out a title too. That would be one thing that I would do, but I'm going to look through my things I have here that just might work really well. I mean, she was so happy to be outside. So um, I'll figure all that kind of stuff out. But in general, that's what the layout looks like. I think it turned out really well. I do like having the extra photos at the bottom, but it's easy enough to be carried over into a second page. You could do a similar border, have it be turn the opposite direction. I do have a directional border here with the grass. I mean, grass turning out the side maybe it looks a little awkward, but you can play around with a little bit if you have some vertical photos. The other thing you can do if you're trying to incorporate more photos, I could have left this wider, this photo here at the 4x6 inches wide, and then I would have a 4x6 and a 4x4 photo that could be done as peekaboo pockets. So there are ways to add additional photos if you need to, and of course you can do, if you have all vertical photos that you wanted to use, you could do those mounted or on the 4x6. And have three 3x4 photos across here. So they'd be 3 inches wide, 4 inches tall. That might be a fun way to do it as well. So if you're trying to figure out how to get more photos on that single page layout, there are some options for you to be able to do that. All right, so that was fun. What a way to break back into Scrapbook Live. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am planning to be back next week. Normally in the summer, I do take a little bit, I kind of go every other week. So if for some reason there's still a few tasks I have to do, like get my driver's license and get our cars re-registered. So we're trying to do that as a family, which means we're trying to balance out what my oldest son is doing and getting all that done. So I think we're gonna try to do it this week, but it may get pushed into next week. But the plan is to be back next week for Scrapbook Live. One thing to note for me that's kind of interesting is that school starts here about a month earlier than it does in Washington. So whereas last year, I think I was still doing every other week through the month of August, I will be definitely back weekly in August for Scrapbook Live. So if I do end up needing to take a little bit of time off to, I don't know, get my kid moved to college, that might have to happen. But thank you so much for joining me live today. Hopefully you have a chance to put this layout together. There is the hashtag on on the handout. So if you do post it, if you do share it into one of the groups, please use the Scrapbook Live or hashtag Scrapbook Live 0710 for July 10th. And so yeah, that should be fun. This is a virtual crop week for Creative Memories. So if you are participating in that, I hope you enjoy it. This afternoon, they'll have a new sketch for part of the summer sketch challenge that is taking place. So if you have not subscribed to the Creative Memories blog, make sure you do so. You get those delivered right to your inbox. The same thing for my particular Scrapbook Live stuff. If you subscribe to my blog, you will get a notification in your inbox when I post the handouts onto my blog. You'll get an email saying that that new blog post has been published. And Creative Memories, they do have ways now for, especially on their sketches, to be able to print out those PDFs. That's really handy if you like to keep all those in a binder of ideas. So thanks for joining me. I will plan to see you next week. In the meantime, try to stay cool. We are going through a kind of a, well, it's Arizona. It's going to be hot. I think it's going to be like 113 today. I do have a pool that I can go relax in, but I know some of you in the Midwest, the Northeast, Southeast, all over the place. It's hot and humid. That's July. It's not always the best time of year, but it's a great way to stay indoors, scrapbook some in the afternoon, and head back out in the evening and just take your bug spray, right? That's all you need. All right, we will see everyone later. I'll post some more pictures once I get this all fixtured, and I'll show you my scrapbook, my light for this room, because it's pretty awesome. If you have a scrapbook room, it might be the perfect light for you. Lots of even lighting in the space. All right, take care, everybody. See you soon.